She lost her father to death. She would soon lose her marriage to betrayal. On the day Martha Lawrence buried her father, the only man who had ever protected her, her husband disappeared, claiming to chase antiques. Hours later, she smelled perfume on his coat. She ignored it. She shouldn't have. The October air felt brittle. Martha Lawrence stood motionless before her father's casket, her black dress absorbing the funeral home's solemn atmosphere. At 58, grief hollowed her from the inside, leaving her cold and empty despite having thought she was prepared for this moment. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to find Tom, her husband of 25 years. His eyes were glued to his smartphone, the new watch on his wrist catching light as he checked the time. Something had changed since he retired from teaching 2 years ago, something Martha couldn't quite name. Her son Jason approached with his family and embraced her tightly. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, his eyes searching her face with concern. "I will be," Martha replied, the words feeling like pebbles in her mouth. Throughout the service, Martha noticed Tom growing increasingly restless, checking his smartphone with barely concealed impatience. The pastor spoke of her father's kindness and quiet strength while Martha clutched her handkerchief, remembering how her father had guided her through every significant life moment with steadfast wisdom. "This is dragging on, isn't it?" Tom shifted beside her, leaning in to whisper. Martha gave him a sidelong glance, his detachment unusually pronounced even for someone who had never been close to her father. At the reception after the funeral was held in the church hall, with photographs of Frederick Ellis' life displayed on easels. Among the mourners, Ruth Finley, a 72-year-old attorney and decades-long friend of her father, approached Martha. "Your father was an extraordinary man," Ruth told her. "If you need anything, Martha, anything at all, please call me." Martha thanked her, watching Tom lurking at the edge of the room, his attention fixed on his smartphone. Midway through the reception, he approached her with an animated expression. "Martha, I need to step out," he said in a lowered voice. "There's an antique buying opportunity one can't miss. Tonight's the auction deadline, and I've already paid half the deposit." Martha stared at him in disbelief. "Today? Now? Tom, this is my father's funeral." I know, he said, rhythmically tapping his thigh. "But I'll be back soon." As she watched him go, a strange foreboding enveloped her. Hours later, when Tom returned, Martha detected a faint scent of women's perfume but chose not to question him. A few days after the funeral, Martha and Tom sat in her father's lawyer's office as Mr. Hamilton opened Frederick Ellis' will. "Mr. Ellis has left his entire estate to his daughter, Martha Ellis Lawrence," he said. "His primary asset is an investment portfolio worth $200,000. Martha drew in a surprised breath while Tom's posture suddenly straightened, his eyes brightening. "Your father also left this letter for you." Martha opened the envelope and read aloud, "Dear Martha, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Since the day you were born, I've been saving to safeguard your future. Use this money to someday fulfill your dreams. I'm so proud of you. Love, Dad." Tears welled in her eyes as she traced her finger over his handwriting. Meanwhile, a subtle change passed over Tom's face but was quickly masked. "One more important matter," Mr. Hamilton continued. "Mr. Ellis set up a special account for the inheritance that only Martha can access. Tom, you are not a co-signatory." "Why not?" Tom asked sharply. "We're married. The inheritance should be our shared property." "It was Mr. Ellis' explicit instruction," Mr. Hamilton said quietly. The drive home was filled with tension, with Tom's voice sounding distant as he remarked, "Your father was always thinking ahead, wasn't he?" After the funeral 3 weeks later, Martha was organizing her father's belongings while Tom had been behaving increasingly strangely, unexplained absences, expensive purchases, and persistent questions about the inheritance. "What are you planning to do with it?" he asked that morning. "It's wasteful to just let it sit in the bank." "I haven't decided yet," Martha answered. There's no rush. That night, while reading her father's diary, Martha felt a strange sensation run down her right arm. A sharp pain shot through her chest. "Tom." She called out, but the words wouldn't form properly. Her vision distorted, the room tilting before she collapsed, hearing distant footsteps before losing consciousness. Martha awoke in a sterile hospital room to the rhythmic beeping of monitors. A nurse named Vera appeared at her bedside. "You were brought in with a stroke," Vera explained. "Fortunately, it was mild, but if you'd been brought in much later, it could have been life-threatening." "My husband?" Martha managed to ask. "He was here until just now, but he got a phone call and stepped out." Vera hesitated. "To be honest, he didn't seem very concerned." Martha nodded, feeling the weight of Tom's indifference settling over her like a cold shadow. Martha lay in her hospital bed as Tom entered the room. Without much greeting, he settled into the chair by the window and immediately began scrolling through his phone. "What did the doctor say?" Martha asked, her speech clearer than yesterday. "You'll need to stay here for a while," Tom replied without looking up. "At least a week." "Will you come visit me?" "When I can," he answered vaguely. "Things are busy with this antique deal I'm working on." Martha silently stared at the ceiling. In 25 years of marriage, Tom had never been this cold. Something was wrong. The man who once graded papers late into the night, who had cared so deeply about his students, now couldn't even look his wife in the eye after she'd suffered a stroke. Later, when Nurse Vera came to check her vitals, Martha couldn't help asking, "What do you think of my husband?" Vera hesitated. "Professionally, I shouldn't comment, but..." She lowered her voice. "As one woman to another, you deserve better treatment than that." That afternoon, Tom visited again but constantly checked his watch. "Sorry, I have to go," he said, standing abruptly. "Need to pick up your medication." As he headed for the door, Martha caught a glimpse of his face reflected in the bathroom mirror, a cold smirk that vanished in an instant. Her chest tightened with dread. Sleep eluded Martha as Tom's strange behavior consumed her thoughts, the women's perfume on the day of the funeral, that fleeting smirk, his persistent questions about her inheritance. The iPad Tom had left behind sat on the bedside table. Martha picked it up with trembling fingers and entered their anniversary date password. The device unlocked, and she opened the banking app. What she saw made her heart leap into her throat. There were multiple large withdrawals from the inheritance account, the first one dated the day of her father's funeral. With shaking hands, Martha checked Tom's emails and found receipts from a luxury hotel and a jewelry store bill. "Gift for Diane," the memo read. The date tore her heart most. Everything had begun on the day of her father's funeral. When Tom had slipped away claiming to be bidding on antiques, he had been with this woman named Diane, buying her jewelry with Martha's inheritance. She clutched the iPad to her chest as tears streamed down her face. The monitor's beeping accelerated, and Nurse Vera rushed in. "Are you all right?" Vera asked with concern. "No," Martha answered through tears. "Nothing is all right." The next morning, Martha was ready when Tom arrived. With quiet but firm resolve, she confronted him. "Tom, what did you purchase from my inheritance account?" Tom froze momentarily. "What are you talking about? Where did you go on the day of the funeral?" "I told you, an antique deal." "That's a lie." Martha's voice was quiet but cold as ice. "I know everything. About Diane, about the hotel, about the jewelry." Tom's face was drained of color. Then suddenly, anger flashed in his eyes. "Listen, Martha, I need something for myself too. Since retirement, what am I? I'm nobody. Does that give you the right to steal my father's inheritance?" "It's not your money, it's our family money," he snapped. "You've always been about your father. You never even saw me." Vera rushed in, hearing the commotion. You need to leave, she told Tom firmly. You're upsetting my patient. That evening, a cold message arrived from Tom, staying at my mother's for a while. Can't breathe around you. That night, as moonlight filtered through the window, Martha stared out with tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm so sorry about your precious gift, she whispered, her voice breaking. In the days that followed, Tom didn't return. Martha's calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. Only her son Jason and a handful of friends visited her hospital room. Even some friends suggested, men his age stray sometimes, and, at your age, you might want to think about divorce at least once? Martha felt utterly alone in her betrayal. Only Vera offered real understanding. I was betrayed by my husband too, she confided. But I got back on my feet. You can too. When the day for her to be discharged came, Martha felt a knot of anxiety about returning home. As the taxi pulled up to her house, she gasped. Her belongings, clothes, books, and personal items were scattered in boxes on the front porch. With trembling hands, Martha rang the doorbell. The door opened slightly, held by a security chain. Tom's face appeared in the gap. Open the door, Tom. Martha called, her voice shaking. A woman's laughter echoed from inside. Tom grinned. I've sent your things to your father's old place. This is our space now. I don't have time for a handicapped person. What are you talking about? This is my house. You're confused, Tom said coldly. The doctor said you might have memory problems. Liar. Martha cried, but the door slammed shut. Martha stood on the porch in the cold night air, trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. The betrayal was complete. Her husband had stolen her inheritance, brought another woman into their home, and locked her out. The taxi driver spoke sympathetically. Can I take you somewhere? Any relatives nearby? Martha shook her head. She had no relatives in town. Her friends were taking Tom's side. Her son Jason lived 2 hours away and was currently traveling for work. Just a hotel, she finally said. I just need a place to sleep tonight. That night, in a cheap motel bed, Martha stared at the ceiling, wondering how her life had unraveled so completely. Her husband had betrayed her, thrown her out of her home, and even her friends had abandoned her. And her father, the person she had relied on most, was gone. The morning light filtered weakly through thin motel curtains as Martha sat sipping instant coffee. Her hand still trembled slightly, an after-effect of the stroke. When her phone rang with an unknown number, she hesitated before answering. Martha Lawrence? This is Ruth Finley, your father's friend and attorney. Ruth, from the funeral, Martha remembered the elegant older woman. I've heard you're staying at a motel. What's happening? Martha poured out everything, the inheritance, Tom's betrayal, and her eviction. I'm coming to get you right now. Ruth's voice was resolute. An hour later, Ruth Finley stood at the door, her 72 years wearing elegantly on her composed face. Though she projected authority in her tailored suit, her eyes held genuine warmth. First, you're coming to my home, she stated firmly. Then, we're taking legal action. What Tom has done constitutes multiple violations of the law. But don't worry. Your father made sure your future was protected. In Ruth's study, she spread legal documents across her desk. The transactions Tom made through unauthorized access are legally void. We can recover the misappropriated funds, Ruth explained. But most importantly is the ownership of your house. What do you mean? Your father put the house solely in your name before you were married, Ruth said, showing her a document with a red seal. Tom's name isn't on the deed. He's nothing more than a trespasser. Martha stared in disbelief. Why would Dad do that? Your father was a wise man, Ruth said softly. And your ever-present guardian. Martha felt warmth spreading through her chest, the first real warmth since her father's death. Even from beyond the grave, he was still protecting her. As they sorted through documents, Ruth hesitated before speaking. "There's something you should know, Martha." Martha looked up expectantly. 40 years ago, your father helped my daughter," Ruth said, her voice softening. "Grace was pregnant at 16. Today she's a pediatrician in Chicago, but back then, there were few paths forward for unwed mothers. When she was desperate, your father anonymously provided funds for her college education," Ruth continued. "He never told anyone. I only discovered it was him years later." Ruth's eyes glistened. "Your father helped people quietly, without seeking recognition. Now it's my turn to help you." Martha felt tears welling up. This was the father she knew, the quiet hero who changed lives without fanfare. Later, Jason called. "Mom, Grandpa saw this coming. I found his diary. He was worried about Dad's spending habits years ago. That's why he put the house in your name only." Martha wiped away tears. "He protected me until the very end." Looking at her father's photograph on Ruth's mantle, Martha made a silent promise. "I'll make you proud, Dad." A quiet determination awakened inside her. She wouldn't seek revenge, she would seek justice. The following morning, Vera called. "How are you doing? Can I help with anything? Would you be willing to testify about what you witnessed?" Martha asked with newfound conviction. "Absolutely," Vera didn't hesitate. "What Tom did while you were vulnerable was inexcusable." Ruth worked methodically, building their case. "We have everything documented, the unauthorized transactions, Vera's testimony, and most importantly, clear property rights." One evening, Martha discovered an old letter from her father to his lawyer. "The house is Martha's sanctuary. It belongs to her alone, and I've structured it this way to ensure her security, regardless of future circumstances." Martha pressed the letter to her chest. "He knew," she whispered. "Somehow, he knew I might need protection someday." "Your father observed people carefully," Ruth nodded. "He may have seen things in Tom that concerned him, even before you did." After a week at Ruth's house, Martha felt her strength returning, not just physically, but emotionally. Her son Jason had returned and stood firmly by her side. "We have everything we need," Ruth said, showing Martha the legal documents. "The house deed in your name only, records of unauthorized bank access, and testimony about Tom's misconduct during your illness. Will this go to trial?" Martha asked, her stomach tightening. "Only if you want it to," Ruth replied. "But Tom won't want to fight. He knows he would lose." "What's our first step?" "Changing the locks on your house," Ruth said decisively. "It's perfectly legal since you're the sole owner." That afternoon, Martha, Ruth, Jason, and a locksmith headed to the house. The locksmith worked quickly, and soon Martha was turning a new key in her front door. When she stepped inside, she gasped. The house was a mess, empty pizza boxes, wine bottles, and a stranger's belongings scattered everywhere. "Let's document this," Ruth said, taking photos with her phone. While Jason carried in Martha's belongings, Martha surveyed what had once been her sanctuary. Her father's photographs had been removed, replaced with unfamiliar art. Her gardening tools had been thrown outside, and strange sheets covered her bed. "He tried to erase me completely," Martha whispered, the reality of Tom's betrayal hitting her anew. "But he failed," Ruth said firmly. "Now, let's prepare for their return." They placed Tom's belongings on the front porch with a formal legal notice. Then they waited. Late that afternoon, a car screeched to a halt outside. Martha saw Tom, a woman she assumed was Diane, and Tom's mother Helen jumping out. "Ready?" Ruth asked quietly. Martha nodded. She was trembling, but not from fear, from resolve. "This house is mine," she said softly. "He's nothing but a trespasser. The doorbell rang furiously, followed by angry pounding. "Open up!" Tom bellowed. Martha opened the door slowly. Behind her stood Ruth, Jason, and a police officer they had called as a precaution. Tom's face flushed with anger, his mother wore the same expression. Diane hung back, looking uncomfortable. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Tom shouted. "Tom," Martha said calmly. "This house is mine. It always has been. Don't talk nonsense. This is the property deed." Ruth stepped forward. "It's in Martha Ellis Lawrence's name only. It has been since before your marriage." Tom turned utterly pale. "That's a lie. Furthermore," Ruth continued, "you illegally accessed her bank accounts while she was incapacitated. That's a crime. Who are you?" Tom's mother interjected angrily. "Eleanor Ruth Finley, attorney at law," Ruth replied. "I represent Martha. All the unauthorized withdrawals during my illness are documented," Martha said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You can either return the money, or we can press charges. You can't. This house is in my name. My father told me before we married, protect your own roof. He was right." Tom stood speechless. His mother began shouting at the police officer, who calmly explained the situation. "Ma'am, this house legally belongs to Mrs. Lawrence. Your presence here without her permission constitutes trespassing." "I never thought you had this in you," Tom finally said through gritted teeth. "I never thought you would betray me," Martha replied. "On the day of my father's funeral." The confrontation she had feared was unfolding, but Martha felt strangely calm. For the first time since her father's death, she felt in control again. She watched Tom's face contort with anger and then collapse into disbelief as the reality sank in. In the end, Tom agreed to settle with just a few $1,000s in compensation. He lacked both the resources and the will to fight. After the settlement meeting, Tom approached Martha. He looked tired and aged. "Is this really the end, Martha?" he asked. "Yes, Tom. It is," she answered quietly. "For 25 years, I supported you. Now it's time to live my own life. What am I supposed to?" "That's your problem," Martha said. "It no longer concerns me." In the months that followed, Tom's life deteriorated rapidly. Once a respected teacher, he now lived with his mother, his reputation in town ruined. He worked as a Walmart night security guard, for minimum wage in a lonely trailer park. Diane had abandoned him as soon as the money ran out, seeking her next target. Meanwhile, Martha's life was taking a new direction. She finalized her divorce proceedings and recovered most of her inheritance. More importantly, she began to truly understand the meaning of her father's final gift. One spring morning, Martha stood in front of a small storefront. The sign painter was carefully applying gold letters, "Ellis Books." Inside, shelves waited for books to be unpacked. Martha had used her father's inheritance to fulfill her lifelong dream, opening a bookstore like the ones her father had taken her to as a child. Vera arrived with a plant. "This place is going to be wonderful," she said, looking around. "I couldn't have done it without you," Martha said, embracing her. "Your testimony helped me get my life back." "You did that yourself," Vera insisted. "I just gave you a little push." Jason came with his children to help arrange the children's section. "Mom, I haven't seen you this happy in years," he observed. "I haven't been this happy in years," Martha admitted. "Maybe ever." Ruth brought a brass wind chime. "To hang by the door," she explained. "So you'll always hear a welcome when someone enters your new life." Martha hung it immediately, listening to its gentle tones. Each note seemed to say, "You did it. You survived. You thrived." The bell above the door chimed softly as Martha adjusted the new display window. Ellis Books had been open for nearly a year now, the small storefront transformed into a warm sanctuary filled with carefully curated volumes and the comforting scent of coffee and old paper. Martha stood back to admire her work, a collection of classics arranged around a vintage reading lamp. "It looks perfect," Vera said, entering with 2 coffee cups. Once Martha's nurse, she had become a close friend. "Your father would be so proud." "I hope so," Martha smiled, accepting the coffee gratefully. The door chimed again as Walter Harrison entered. At 65, this retired librarian and veteran had been her very first customer and now visited almost daily. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I brought back the Steinbeck and came for recommendations." "Welcome back," Martha replied, feeling the now familiar flutter when he smiled. Martha watched as Walter browsed the literature section, his fingers gently tracing the spines of books with a reverence that matched her own. "You truly love books, don't you?" Martha observed. "They've been my best companions," Walter nodded. "Especially since my wife passed away." In the months since opening, Ellis Books had become a local treasure. It attracted middle-aged women especially, many of whom had, like Martha, survived marriages to men like Tom. They came for books but stayed for connection, sharing not just literary recommendations but life experiences. "Your shop has become more than a bookstore," Ruth remarked one afternoon. "It's a place where people come to start over." Martha nodded. She knew this transformation intimately, she was living it herself. Weekend afternoons at Ellis Books had become a family tradition. Jason and his family would visit, the grandchildren sprawling across the special children's corner Martha had designed for them. She held regular reading sessions, her teacher's skills bringing stories to life for enraptured young faces. "Mom, you seem more alive than I've seen you in years," Jason commented one afternoon. "Do I?" Martha laughed. "Perhaps I am. Grandpa would be proud, don't you think?" Martha nodded, glancing at the small memorial space with her father's photograph and his favorite books she had created in a quiet corner of the store. One weekend, Jason brought the remainder of her father's diaries. "Mom, look at this," he said, opening to a marked page. "It's what Grandpa wrote near the end." Martha took the diary, her fingers recognizing her father's handwriting immediately. Martha is a strong woman. She just doesn't know it herself yet. Tom doesn't appreciate her. I won't be able to protect her much longer, but I've done what I can. I hope the day comes when she discovers her own strength. Tears welled in Martha's eyes. "Oh, Dad." "He was right," Jason said softly. "You are strong." Martha embraced her son tightly. "I'm so grateful to have you." That afternoon, Martha and Walter sat playing chess by the window while her grandchildren played among the bookshelves. "Checkmate," Walter smiled. "I lost again," Martha laughed. "But you're improving each time," he noted. "You're a quick learner." Something special was blossoming between them, but Martha was in no hurry. She was still savoring her newfound independence. On a quiet afternoon, the door chimed, and Martha looked up to see Tom entering her store. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked gaunt and worn down. "Martha." "Tom," she replied calmly. "What brings you here?" He had come to justify himself, but seeing Martha vibrant and thriving, left him speechless. Living alone in his trailer park after reading about her bookstore in the local paper, he had finally gathered the courage to face her. "I came to apologize," he finally said. "For what I did?" Martha studied him carefully. "Would you like to sit?" They settled at a small table in the corner. The store was nearly empty. "It's a nice place," Tom said, looking around. "Thank you." "Martha, I ruined everything," he admitted. "Your inheritance, our marriage, everything." "Yes," Martha agreed simply. "You probably can't forgive me." To her own surprise, Martha responded with unexpected gentleness. Actually, I should thank you. Tom looked at her in confusion. Your betrayal helped me find myself. In a way, you set me free. Tom was speechless, able only to nod deeply. Are you happy now? He asked. Yes. Very, Martha answered truthfully. And you? No, he said honestly. But I deserve this. As he stood to leave, Martha rose as well. Goodbye, Tom. Goodbye, Martha. He walked out with slightly straighter shoulders than when he had entered. Watching through the window, Martha noticed he didn't look back. The past was truly behind her now. That evening, as closing time arrived, Martha turned the sign on the door. Through the window, she saw Walter waving gently from across the street. She waved back with a smile. Martha approached the corner where her father's photograph stood among his beloved books. Dad, your gift gave me a new life, she whispered. I understand what you meant now. I can finally say I'm proud of myself. Throughout the store, evidence of her new life was everywhere, her grandchildren's drawings on a wall, Ruth and Vera chatting over coffee, book club schedules for the coming month. As Martha closed the shop door, the wind chime her father had loved tinkled softly in the evening breeze. Martha paused on the sidewalk, breathing in the spring air. At 58, she had discovered that endings could also be beginnings. Her fingers touched the key to her shop, her key to her future. The inheritance her father had left wasn't just financial, it was the courage to rebuild, to stand tall, to find joy again. The wind chime sounded once more as if in answer, and Martha smiled. She had lost her father to death and her marriage to betrayal, but in that losing, she had found herself, the greatest inheritance of all.